At the onset of 1985, Neil Dellacroce's world began to crumble, both legally and health-wise. On February 26, 1985, he and others were indicted and charged with governing a commission, as well as narcotic trafficking, loan sharking, gambling, labor racketeering, and for ordering the 1979 murder of Carmine Galante. Dellacroce also had tax evasion charges tacked on. The following month in March, Dellacroce and fellow Gambinos were indicted on a racketeering case. On top of the mountain of legal problems, Dellacroce was also diagnosed with cancer, and he was 71 years old. At the time, there were whispers going around that his mind was slipping. However, initially this wasn't the case, as we'll see. When Gambino captain Michael Tacetta had to go into a hospital for treatment, he decided to make Buddy Lafort, a member of his crew, the acting captain. The mistake Tacetta made was circumventing Dellacroce, who was the family's underboss. He instead went to Paul Castellano, the Gambino boss, for approval. Adding insult to injury, Tacetta allegedly made reference to Dellacroce being senile, an insult that reached the ears of Dellacroce. By going around him, Tacetta disrespected Dellacroce's position as the underboss. During a recorded conversation, which took place at Dellacroce's Staten Island house on June 3, 1985, between Dellacroce, Angelo Ruggiero, who was his nephew, and Michael Tacetta, who were all captured on tape. Apparently, Tacetta was getting his ass handed to him on that day. Dellacroce told him, "I'm through with you. You understand? I don't want to say hello to you. I'm going to tell you right now, after you leave this house, don't come in this house anymore. 20 years ago, they would have found you in some fucking hole someplace. You know what I mean? But things change. Things change now because there's too much conflict. People do whatever they feel like. They don't train their people no more. There's no more respect. If you can't be sincere, you can't be honest with your friends, then forget about it. You got nothing." Ultimately, Dellacroce shelved Tacetta, but he wasn't done with him yet, and made him understand that at that moment, he was far from senile. He had Ruggiero go around telling other members that Tacetta was now shelved. Dellacroce was even recorded telling one member, "He don't belong in the family no more. Any friend of yours, any friend of ours in the street that you see, you tell him this guy, he ain't in the family no more. You don't have nothing to do with him. That's it." On June 9, 1985, Dellacroce and Ruggiero spoke with Gambino captain Jimmy Brown and explained that Tacetta was on the shelf and to let everyone know his status. Later that day, Dellacroce and Ruggiero also met with Joe the Cat Lafort, and the topic of conversation was Lafort's son Buddy, who was also put on the shelf along with Tacetta. At one point, Dellacroce told Lafort regarding his son, "You should have grabbed him and wrapped a bat around his neck." During this time frame, the Gotti crew was in serious hot water with Paul Castellano. The main issue was drug dealing, and specifically the tapes from a bug that was placed in Ruggiero's house. Castellano wanted to listen to the tapes and put pressure not only on John Gotti, the captain of the crew, but his rabbi and mentor, Neil Dellacroce. Ruggiero refused to hand over the tapes, first and foremost, for self-preservation and to protect the guys he was speaking to. Besides talk of drug dealing, some of the conversations consisted of bad-mouthing Castellano. Most of us know how all that ended, so I'll spare the details by not repeating it. But more importantly is what took place prior to all of that. As 1985 moved along, going into the winter, Dellacroce's condition began to deteriorate. Whether it was exacerbated by the stress, the cancer, or both is unknown. But at some point, he was bedridden and not fully coherent. During the late 1990s, I was in prison with Ernie Grillo, who at the time was just a Gambino associate, and also the former son-in-law of Neil Dellacroce. And more significantly, Ernie was present when everything was unfolding in 1985. Keep in mind, Dellacroce may have held the number 2 position within the family, but was respected on a much higher level than Castellano. In fact, Had it not been for Dellacroce, John Gotti and his crew might have met a different fate. Dellacroce was the only thing that stood in the way of Castellano breaking the crew up and more than likely killing a few of them. So to put it in perspective, Castellano, the rightful boss of the family, was demanding that the Gotti crew hand over the tapes, but was being jerked around with excuses, and by all rights, he had to make an example out of someone for disregarding his order. So as you can imagine, the tension back then was so thick that you could have cut it with a knife. Dellacroce lived at the West Fingerboard Road house with his guamara, Rosemary Conley. They had 2 children together, Shannon, who everyone called Sandy, and Sean. As I've mentioned, Dellacroce was bedridden, and according to Ernie, Castellano showed up one afternoon at the house unannounced, and most likely was with his soon-to-be new underboss, Tommy Bellotti. But Ernie never said who he came with. After arriving, they all went into Dellacroce's bedroom and closed the door. If you haven't liked this video yet, please do, as it helps with YouTube's algorithm. And if you'd like to show your appreciation for videos like this, or help me to continue making them, you can do so by donating with the Super Thanks icon down below, or through the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. Sensing something wasn't right, Rosemary Conley, thinking quickly, got in touch with John Gotti and told him what was taking place. Not long after, Gotti rushed over to Staten Island and showed up at the house, which definitely came as a surprise to Castellano. The way I understood it was Gotti wanted to be present in case Castellano tried anything underhanded, such as saying Dellacroce consented to breaking the crew up, or worse, approved killing them. Not that Castellano needed permission to do either, but they obviously didn't trust him. He may have just been there to visit Dellacroce, his underboss, and had no ill intentions, but under the circumstances, it was definitely a strategic move to place the call to Gotti. Following the visit, Dellacroce's health became progressively worse, and at some point, he was admitted into Mary Immaculate Hospital in Queens, and was under the alias Timothy O'Neill. And on December 2nd, 1985, Neil Dellacroce passed away.